Okay, recording has started, so give me just a second here.
As you should, huh?
Okay, let me confirm that.
You look cute, Carrie.
Pardon?
You look cute.
Oh, thank you. Yes, okay, guys, we are live, and thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Hollywood Kitchen. I'm so excited today to welcome once again frequent Hollywood Kitchen collaborator and my friend Benjamin in Germany, and the great Peter Riva, the grandson of Marlene Dietrich. So thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Great to be here again. Thank you.
And today we decided to make Dietrich's cucumber salad. It is very, very hot in Los Angeles right now. I joke that this is the time of year when my oven basically becomes a storage facility.
Yeah.
It just kind of looks like an oven because it's so hot. If I turn it on, the entire apartment is basically like 350 degrees.
Most of Europe as well. I have relatives in England, and it's going to be an all-time record high temperature tomorrow.
Oh, gosh.
Anybody who tells you there's no global warming should just stay still tomorrow and think about it.
I agree with you. I agree. So we decided, as much as Dietrich loved beef tea and schnitzel and other things, the cucumber salad was basically calling Benjamin and I's name today.
Good.
So that's what we're going to make. So why don't we kind of start off by talking about the cucumber salad. It is in the book. I have a vintage copy, but we're going to talk about the new edition coming out. Okay, yes, this is a new edition, Marlene Dietrich's ABCs, Wit, Wisdom, and Recipes. And Peter, this hits bookstores next week.
A week from today, and it's available on Kindle as well, and it'll be available worldwide.
Excellent. Benjamin, do you want to show your vintage German copy from 1963?
Yeah, so that's the German copy from it's 1963 called Marlene Dietrich's ABC. ABC of my life, actually.
Yeah.
And I have the 1962 vintage copy that I got on eBay, and it's here in my little protective plastic recipe cookbook shield. But yes, I have the vintage copy. But this is a really fun book filled with all sorts of thoughts on Dietrich, on everything from cynicism to schnitzel to her life and to her thoughts on Salvador Dali. So it's got a random potpourri of thoughts, and it's really fun. I definitely recommend it.
Well, the recipe you're going to do today, I would say there's a critical element in there that is the secret of any good cucumber salad, whether it be French, German, American, or Greek, as in tzatziki. The secret is, now you know, Carrie, what it is. It's grating or slicing the cucumber and finding a way to press the water out of it. Nothing more important than that.
I'm trying to do it. I tried to slice these before we went on camera, and I tried to get them as thin as I could, but it's not easy. It's really hard to get a really thin cucumber slice.
You know, you either do it the right way or the wrong way, and hers were paper thin. You could see through them.
Oh, wow. Oh, my God.
And did she cut it with a knife?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sure.
Okay.
She was an expert cook. I mean, I still have some of her knives, and they sharpen up. They're old steel, you know, which means they are early stainless steel, which means that they're more carbon than the stainless steel you get today. So they go dull quickly, but they sharpen very quickly. And she never, ever used a knife without sharpening it first. Take a knife out of the drawer, sharpen it.
Let me ask you this. What did she sharpen it with? Did she have some of these little, what do you do to sharpen?
She had a variety of sharpening stones. Mainly, the English make the best sharpening stones. The Germans don't, funnily enough. The English make the best sharpening stones. They're about that long, and you hold it and you just, we were all taught as kids to do that, one side then the other, and then go ahead and use it. Even the paring knives, even the small knives you use in the kitchen, you always sharpen them before using them. And, the adaptation later on was using a sieve and putting the cucumber in a sieve in a bowl and putting weight on top allowed the juice to drain away from the cucumbers into the bottom of the bowl better than just pressing the cucumbers. Variations on the theme.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think it's important to give salt in it, isn't it?
Yes, but the thing is, the difference between the Greek, the Italian, and the American one, where you put salt on the sliced cucumber, Marlene wanted to keep the cucumber always sweet, so she never put salt on until she was mixing it later on. She allowed the cucumbers to drain on their own so they stayed sweet, and then she used them later on. The other problem you have today is that, in a book like Marlene Dietrich's ABC, is not really a cookbook, so you don't go and talk, which she could do, for paragraphs on which cucumber to buy and what it should look like in the market and how big it should be and how small. Too small is not good, too big, the seeds are too big and not edible. You have to know how to pick your cucumber. Also, not Japanese cucumbers, which are great, not burpless ones because they have no flavor. You want real old-fashioned cucumbers in their middle age, about that long. You take the top and the bottom off because those are bitter. You then take the peel off sometimes. Sometimes you leave the peel on depending upon how hard the peel is. If it's been a really hot summer, the peel is very hard and you shave about half of it off. And the French particularly do that. They shave half the peel, leaving these things of green around each ring. But if you can leave the peel on because it's a young cucumber, that's great.
I've got to say, Peter, in doing a lot of these Hollywood Kitchen episodes, so many of these recipes are not super specific, and that's gotten me into a lot of trouble because I think some of these cookbooks were written for maybe housewives that were super seasoned at cooking and they left out a lot of details. And I kind of need a tremendous amount of specificity. So I kind of blame that for some of the disasters I have incurred while doing these episodes.
I'm sure not. I'm sure it's all delicious.
I try. But so I'm pressing as hard as I can. I don't know how much juice I'm getting out of these. And I have a question for you, gentlemen. Now, I'm going to put some cucumbers in a bowl here. But when it says add the dill, I've never cooked with dill before. So I brought some organic dill.
Great.
You slice up the dill, or what do you do with the dill?
Okay. Do you see what's nearest your left hand?
The top part. Yes.
Yeah. Only the top part. And you
Okay.
do you have a chopping knife?
I just have this.
Just that. Okay. Well, her knives are about this long, and they're scalloped on the bottom, and you rotate them, and you cut, and you make it fine, but you don't go all the way down. You're going to stop just when the last of the finest leaves of the dill are showing. And
I think I really need to finally invest in a set of kitchen knives.
Let me see what's under your hand.
Okay.
Little bit more, and then what you have in your left hand, you'll get a glass. Put some water in the glass, put that plant in the glass, water, put it next to a windowsill, and it'll continue to grow.
Great. Okay, so I've got a pretty nice little amount of dill right here.
Yeah, it's good. I would say that it's about half chopped.
Oh, goodness. Okay, well.
And it has a great aroma. I think when you cut it, you can smell it. So it's very special.
Dill is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
So Peter, you said I could take this and put it in water?
A glass, about this much water, and put it next to the window, and the roots there will give you hydroponics, and you might get another crop of dill off of that.
Oh, how cool is that? Excellent.
If you have a window box with earth, you could put it in the earth and it would grow as well.
Oh, wow. Well, I have some boxes outdoors in my little garden outside.
And plant it and enjoy it.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, I definitely need to take some lessons in chopping and get some decent knives. That is true.
Yep.
Okay, well, I think I got it a little bit better chopped here.
Looks good.
So I'm going to add the dill to the cucumber.
Right.
Okay. And then I'm going to mix this up a little bit. Alrighty, and let's see. Now it says you can serve oil and vinegar, dill, or sour cream. So I've got a little bit of oil here.
Okay, now hang on. Two different recipes. All right. If you're doing Greek, you'd now put Greek yogurt in it and garlic. That would make tzatziki. In France, you don't use sour cream in France, but in Germany you do. So if you're making the French version, then you use olive oil. You do need either lemon or vinegar.
I shall make the German version.
There you go.
Oh, good.
All right,
Do you
I do
have-
have sour cream.
Good. Do you have any lemon?
Not on me. I'd have to run to the
Do
store.
you have any vinegar?
Hang on just a sec. I think I do.
Okay.
Hang on. I've got some white distilled vinegar that I use.
Perfect. That's fine. Yep. You
Things.
want about, in that bowl, I would say you need a half a level teaspoon. So use the cut that the top of the, oh yeah, use the teaspoon. Use the lid about just a little bit in there and sprinkle it over the top. That's it. Now
Alrighty.
put your sour cream in. Oh, I love you. Sour cream. I mean, put sour cream in it, not a little teeny bit. How much sour cream do you have?
Have a decent amount in here.
I would think probably all of that's going to go in there.
Oh, wow.
surprised.
Okay. Okay, I can do that. I still didn't get enough juice out of the cucumbers. I'm really gonna have to kind of work on that.
That's okay. It's not the end of the world. You get it next time. You can shred the cucumber to make, if you have to make it quickly, instead of slicing the cucumber, shred the cucumber and the water comes out a lot easier.
How do you shred a cucumber? Like, pardon my not knowing that.
Just with a shredder. Don't you have a shredder in your kitchen?
Yeah, I do have one over there. Okay. Okay, so
Now-
this is basically
Yep,
what
hang
my
on. You need salt.
salt. I've got salt here.
There you go. A
Alright,
little
and
bit
then
more. A
more.
little bit more. Trust me. Okay.
All right, so Peter Riva has helped me make the cucumber salad of his grandmother.
Only because I've been doing it since I was a kid. So
Oh, very cool. So now that we've made the dish, I always like to get the food done first.
turn it over, Carrie.
Turn it over.
Turn it over.
Okay.
And you keep turning it over for about 20 minutes before you serve it.
Well, while I'm turning over, Benjamin has got a great list of questions. So
Go.
Benjamin,
I'm
do you
here.
want to kind of lead the questioning here while I
Oh, yeah.
turn over?
Carrie, you
So-
know something, Carrie, you're really brave cooking on camera. That's really brave of you. I would have made a mess. You did a great job.
Thank you. Sometimes I do behind the scenes make messes, but right.
Go ahead, Benjamin. I'm here.
Yeah, so I can show you what I did this morning. So I did actually like two versions. That's with the
Uh-huh.
sour cream.
Right.
So I think it gets better when it's a few hours in the fridge. And
Absolutely.
That's the other one with
Good
vinegar. Yeah, so I was asking myself, how did Marlene learn about like food and cooking? Was she ever interested, or did her mother taught her?
I think it was both her mother and when she was a child, there were maids and cooks in the house, and she would go and assist in the kitchen as young German girls are told to do. You're supposed to learn how to cook if you're going to get married. And she was a good student, an intelligent woman, learned how to do it. I think really a lot of her expertise in being able to cook any dish from any part of the world really was her ability to want to provide the meal with the person she's with, what they wanted. So, you know, if she was with somebody from Italy, she'd make an Italian version of the cucumber. In France, she'd make the French version. In America, she'd make the American version, which for her was a little schlocky. But, you know, she did exactly what her partner or dinner guests wanted to do. If they wanted steak, she cooked the best steak you ever saw. And I have to tell you, the steak au poivre she made for my brother and I when we visited her in Paris was the best steak au poivre I've ever had anywhere, at any restaurant. The woman could cook.
Yeah. And did
I
she
imagine
was
eating
was
it.
there anything from like German food she missed? So I
Well,
read
you
about
know,
it.
the weird thing is, my mother is weird about this too. There are things that are embedded in a Berliner child's memory that you can only get in Germany. You know, that goose fat. I mean, I remember going to a restaurant in California that was a German Bavarian, some kind of restaurant, and it was pretty awful, but they had goose fat, and she was so happy to have goose fat. And Poppy, my grandfather, and she would have bread and goose fat. That would be dinner. I mean, it was just a thing from childhood. And also, I have to tell you that at Christmas, if she was around, everybody in the family would beg her to make her Berliner. I mean, her jelly donuts
Oh,
were
yeah.
the best jelly donuts I've ever had anywhere at any time with anybody. So yes, there were German things that were particularly, you know, interesting to her and part of her who she was, but it was always linked to childhood. It was not necessarily linked to adulthood. Her
Mhm.
tastes as an adult were very sophisticated, but down to earth. It's a hard way to explain that. She, you know, 3 little things on a plate and, you know, little cutesy, no, that wouldn't interest her. But a piece of meat or vegetables cooked perfectly, that was wonderful. So, you know, her restaurants and her desire for restaurants were always linked to how well something was prepared rather than how fancy it got.
Mhm.
I would
She's
love
too
to have
she
jelly.
was too honest for all the. My younger brother Paul has this wonderful expression. He, you know, when they come to a restaurant and they say, "And today's special is the little squeedles," and he goes, "What? Squeedles? You know, it's a baby squeed." Oh yeah, please go away. You know, got to have a new name for something silly. You know, now I've had squid. I love squid. That's not, but it's, you know, they got to make some trickery with it, and that was. For her, that's dishonest and not interesting.
Mhm. I think actually that's very Berlinish, isn't it? So nothing fancy. So
Yeah,
very
yeah.
solid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would kill for that jelly donut recipe because I think eating a Marlene Dietrich jelly
Oh.
donut recipe would be my idea of heaven.
Carrie, I have to tell you something, that those jelly donuts, there was one Christmas in London. She was staying in Sloane Street. I think Marty Stevens had rented the place for her. And the kitchen there was not a very big kitchen, but it was good enough. And she made jelly donuts for 3 days. I think she fed half of London, and I know a box of them went to Noel Coward in Switzerland. I mean, everybody would call, are you making them this year? Are you making your jelly donut? Please, are you making your jelly? I mean, it was ridiculous. People phoning my mother trying to convince her to get Marlene to make the jelly donuts that, I mean, really, they were wonderful. They were wonderful.
Benjamin, we need to make jelly donuts. I think this is
Oh yes. And it's a tradition actually to have them on New Year's Eve.
It is. It is,
Yeah.
absolutely. It was always during Christmas holiday that we had them. And
Yeah.
I think she made them before New Year's because she hated coming to the house for New Year's. That whole Michigas of staying up till midnight didn't interest her. But the family together and jelly donuts, yep, that will do.
You know, do you have a recipe for what her jelly donuts would have been like? Because I'm kind
No,
of
but you know what? You say that, and you're right, I don't. So I'm going to call Mom tomorrow and get her to dictate a recipe to me because darn it, I want one. I'll send it to you.
Oh gosh, and these
Of
trying
course, you know, when
times.
Kennedy went to Berlin, he said, "Ich bin eine Berliner." You know, I got to tell you, the roars of laughter in my family was just wonderful.
Yeah. It's like Frankfurters, you know, the yeah.
So what's your next question?
Yeah, I was going to ask, oh, let's see. Oh yeah, was there a film or a part that Marlene was interested to play and that finally went to another actress? Because I don't know if this is a rumor that Billy Wilder, who was a great friend of hers.
No. I know what you're going to say.
Okay.
Billy Wilder, I know Billy Wilder, and he was a sweet guy. My brother and he were better friends than I was. I've met him only 3 or 4 times, maybe more. But Sunset Boulevard was absolutely never going to be for Marlene, but it's Billy's sense of humor to taquine, to tease Marlene a little bit. You know, I should have cast you as Norma. I really should have, you know, just to tease her a little. That's his Berlin humor. So no, that's Billy's sense of humor. And yeah, it's kind of funny, to be honest with you.
Well, she always denied having made a silent film. And
Yes,
I've heard
well,
from
yeah,
others.
but that's in a way, it's not her fault. First of all, she wanted to put the past behind her. That was important to her. If she was going to reinvent herself completely and become a movie actress, she had to be a movie actress, not anything else. Therefore, she never did theater again. You know, she didn't play the violin for performances and so on. So this was a woman who's saying, okay, I got to be monofocused, I got to do this, and I got to be only that. The other problem was Paramount didn't want anybody to know that she'd been a silent film because they didn't want the films brought over to America, which weren't sexy Dietrich. They thought when they did Blue Angel that they would get this sexy Dietrich. What they got was a Zaftig Dietrich, and they said, what the hell do we do with that? Which is why when they made Morocco, they showed Morocco in America first. The Blue Angel was shown after, out of season, deliberately to just get it out of the way. The fact is, Blue Angel was a great acting job. Everything after Blue Angel was a performance, and there's a difference between acting and performing.
Well, plus, I think there was a lot of stigma about silent films because when sound came in, I think a lot of stars felt that silence were suddenly passé and outdated,
Right.
and that it kind of made them look like dinosaurs. And I think there were some stars that really, some could not distance themselves from it, but some I think tried to, certainly for that reason.
That's true. You know, in hindsight, if you look at the silent film Ship of Lost Souls, that's Dietrich playing Dietrich. The lighting wasn't good, but that's Dietrich playing Dietrich. So people who think that von Sternberg invented Dietrich in Morocco, it's not really true. She just said, that's going to sell. This isn't in America. I'll do the one that's going to sell. And she sculpted herself to that performance the rest of her career, with a couple of exceptions, which were wonderful exceptions, but you know, nevertheless exceptions.
I think it's amazing how Dietrich really invented herself and then reinvented herself. I mean, I think she kind of laid the groundwork for stars ever since who've been doing
Right. Well, don't forget, Carrie, that she was the first actor or actress ever to get a percentage of gross. Not as a producer, as an actor. This in the mid-30s. She said, you want me in this thing? You want to pay me? I also get a percentage of gross. That's the end of the discussion. I mean, she was ahead of her time in so many different ways. You know, Benjamin, you asked me if there was a role that she never got that she wanted. It made me think of a time we used to in London in the 80s. No, sorry, older than that. In the 60s, we used to rent movies. You could rent 16mm movies and we'd show them at home. And one of the movies that my mother chose was a Henry Fonda, Barbara Stanwyck movie called All About Eve. And Marlene was there and we all enjoyed it tremendously. And Marlene's comment, Michael, my brother Michael remembers this better than I do, unfortunately, and it was his memory that I'm capitalizing on, is he said that at the time, she said, I could have done that job and done it better. And I thought that, you know, now I look at that movie, All About Eve, and I think, God, wouldn't Marlene have been wonderful in that movie? She really would have been good, because she had a wonderful comic streak in her. She could do comedy in ways that people didn't understand. She was a lot of fun. In fact, Kate Hepburn used to say that Marlene, using the French word comédienne, with a double entendre, Kate Hepburn always thought Marlene should do much more comedy because she really was good at it. Her timing was impeccable. And there was an imperiousness with her that goes well with that kind of comedy. It would have been fun.
Destry Rides Again. I mean,
Yes.
Destry Rides Again is a hoot. It's just a hoot from beginning to end. My mother, quite rightly in her book, says that, you know, that was Marlene's great American outing to become fully American. And she's right, because she just threw herself in it and loved every moment of it. But part of the reason she loved every moment of it was that she knew what was coming and didn't give a damn. You see, when you know the war is coming and you just want to uplift everybody's spirits and have a damn good time, that's what she did. And you know, the cast and crew of that thing wrote in the 50s and 60s in memories about making that movie. They said they never made a movie where everybody had as much fun as they had making that movie. Everybody loved that movie. The woman who played her not maid, but her dresser in Destry Rides Again, they were friends for life, you know, just because they bonded in that picture. But Marlene knew what was coming, and she knew that was probably her last movie until the war was going to be over, because she knew the war was here.
And she was so different in that movie. I mean, she kind of reinvented herself. Like before, she was a kind of sphinx, like a goddess.
Yeah, but she was still Marlene. That's the thing.
Yes.
That performance was Dietrich unchained. Absolutely, I agree with you. Completely unchained and bizarrely fun. But nevertheless, it was still Dietrich. And she had a way, that's why she was a great star. You know, they now use star too easily. But at the time, she was a great star because she never changed. If you look at today's stars, there's maybe 3 of them, 4 of them, who are in the old definition of star. People like Brad Pitt. Any movie Brad Pitt's in, he's Brad Pitt, even if he's doing a wonderful job in his performance. Johnny Depp's the same thing. You know, like him or hate him, every time it's the same thing. He's always Johnny Depp, but he's a different character. How do you do that? There's a talent there that is rare. Marlene was never a method actress. You know, she would step into the role and out of the role. You know, I remember Alec Guinness was playing Hitler in the West End in London, and his family made him move out during the whole run of the theater, because Alec Guinness became Hitler, and he embodied Hitler, but on stage and off stage, and you couldn't live with him. So it's that kind of acting that Marlene wasn't. She was the opposite of that, you know, and I think the reason her films stand so well over time is because that's true, with the exception of 3 movies, really. 3 speaking movies. One was The Blue Angel, which was a great performance, really great performance. The other, of course, A Touch of Evil, but only if you see the director's cut. What RKO Studios did to that is ridiculous. The director's cut has the full 20 minutes of Dietrich's performance in it, and it's something else to watch. She's really good. And the other one where she just simply played herself, which was No Highway in the Sky. If you see No Highway in the Sky, people say, what was she like as your grandmother? Just go see Highway in the Sky. That's my grandmother. 100% my grandmother. Is her luggage, her outfits, her way of speaking, her genuine care for people who are talented and listening to them. Absolutely her. 100% her. It's weird to watch my grandmother on the screen. Just weird.
It's got to be a disconnect too between the person that you knew versus the person on the screen. Like that has to be kind of a surreal thing.
Yeah, but not in No Highway. That's absolutely my grandmother. I mean, she's the in that picture, she's the person you want as a grandmother.
So it seems to me that she had a good sense of what would become a hit even for others, because I read that she once was in a play, the play of Harvey, which would become a movie with James Stewart. And she said to a German actor who had a downswing on his career during the war. And she said, well, you have to do this because this is a hit in America. So.
Yeah. Well, you know, you remember Peter Lorre, who did the movie M, which is one of the top 10 movies of that era, no question. Peter Lorre was brought to America to do an American version of M again. And she took him aside, as did Robbie Lance, who was his agent at the time. And they both told him, don't do it. You'll be typecast as a murderer the rest of your life.
Yeah.
They knew what worked and what didn't work, what you do and don't do. And Dietrich certainly didn't mind being the on-screen, gorgeous vamp, femme fatale. All of that was fine because that fit the image. But, you know, for her to step out of that role, which was why Judgment at Nuremberg was so hard for her, because she had to step out of that role and play the general's wife who had to claim that nobody knew, and then that was really hard for her. And Spencer Tracy and Kramer had to work on her hard to get her to say those lines because it just turned her stomach. But in the end, she knew it was for a purpose, so that was okay.
One of the questions Benjamin had was, he says, in her Paris years, Dietrich was very well informed about what was going on in the world as she read French, American, and German press. Did she watch TV, and did she have favorite TV shows?
The TV was on 20 hours a day.
Oh, wow.
When tennis was on, particularly the French Open, she was glued. She enjoyed television. It was all French TV because she was in Paris. Movies, everything. She just absorbed everything. And she would watch TV while reading books. She'd watch TV while talking to people. She just turned the volume up and down for something she wanted to hear. She followed world events assiduously. I think that her understanding of the dangers the world was in, particularly as the breakup of the Soviet Union was underway, and glasnost and perestroika as well was something that was very important to her. I think one of the difficulties for her was that she felt that her fame was about this big, but if that gave the leverage necessary to influence somebody, she would use it. And that became difficult for her only because people didn't really were going to listen to an old actress in Paris who's not acting anymore. What influence does she have? And then they would find out that she knew enough people that they'd start getting phone calls. I think Ronald Reagan certainly felt that way. Nancy Reagan was always very dedicated to my grandmother. And as Nancy called me, and 2 days after they had left the White House, she called me to say that they've been trying to ring Marlene and they can't get her, but they get the maid who says she's not available. Well, I knew that's Marlene putting on an accent. Then Nancy said, the last phone call Ronnie made as president of the United States, the very last phone call was to Marlene in Paris to thank her for all the help she gave America over her life. And for me, that struck me as quite incredible that the most powerful politician, diplomat in the world should hold my grandmother in such high regard. And I know Gorbachev did too. When he was incarcerated, oh boy, her phone bills went through because I was paying her phone bills a lot of the time. And it went from $3,000 to $4,000 a month to about $7,000 or $8,000 that month, because she was calling everybody and putting pressure on them to get him released before Russia fell apart and we ended up with another world war. That's how she saw it. And so were a lot of other people. It's not just Marlene, but she did what she could. And the end result was when he got back into office and everything, the first press conference he gave, you may remember, he looks at the audience and says, well, kind of interesting for Carrie's people.
Sorry about that, guys. My internet crashed. I think it's coming back though.
I see your still image, Carrie.
Oh yeah, there you are.
Okay, sorry
Okay.
about that. I was scrambling.
That's all right.
Salvage the internet around here.
So Carrie, while you disappeared for a moment, Benjamin asked me about Marlene's feelings on the fall of the Berlin Wall. And of course, we've been watching all of this very carefully as a family, and we all watched live as the Berlin Wall was being torn apart, which was a wonderful thing. She was very happy at that. But there's a backstory here which may amuse people. For at least 10 years, my grandmother had been asking us to find a suitable grave for her in France. And we would go around France looking at things. She'd hear of a cemetery down near Lyon or someplace, and then we'd make a pilgrimage and have a look at it and send her pictures. No, that's not good. No, it's not good. And obscure instructions for me what to do when she dies and all this kind of stuff. The moment the Berlin Wall fell, her comment was, good, I can be buried next to my mother. I had seen that cemetery in 66. As a student, I traveled to Berlin. I spent 4 or 5 days on the eastern side of Berlin and the rest of the time on the western side. And I'd gone to the cemetery and I'd taken photographs of the cemetery where her mother is buried. And I, of course, sent them to her. What we didn't know was that all of her descriptions of the cemetery we were supposed to find matched those of where her mother was buried. Identical, with the ivy and the birch trees and regimented. Okay, so, and a lot of soldiers buried there as well, and so on. So for her, in her head, obviously she wanted to be buried next to her mother. And the moment the wall was down, she said, good, I can be buried next to my mother. So the connection with the wall coming down was a positive thing. Don't forget, Marlene was less German than she was a Berliner.
Mm-hmm.
It's why Helmut Kohl wouldn't come to the funeral, because I put the Berlin flag on her coffin instead of the German flag. And the moment I did that, he said, then I'm not coming to the funeral. And frankly, we didn't care too much. It was important to him that the German was returning home. No, the Berliner was returning home. That's the point. She died in France. She had the French flag on her coffin. At the end of the ceremony in the Madeleine, we put the American flag on her coffin, as an American should. She traveled back to Germany in a plane, Lufthansa actually, with the American flag on. And when we got to the airport in Germany, we folded the American flag, which I have, and put the Berlin flag on her coffin. And I got a phone call before I got to the hotel that Helmut Kohl wasn't coming. It was that quick.
Yeah. But I remember your mother was saying in an interview that when the coffin was brought to the cemetery, there were people cheering this on the street, and they were throwing flowers.
Well, you know, typical Marlene. I mean, you have to understand, I organized the funeral, and it was just so many days, and there was how much could be done within the time frame. So nobody was planning a Thursday in Berlin, you know. But what happened is, Thursday happened to be the flower market day. And the Cadillac, open Cadillac with her coffin on the back coming down the street where the flower market was, bless them, everybody in the flower market put flowers on top of her coffin. It was just a wonderful thing. And years later, you saw the same thing done with Diana. When she died in Britain, people put flowers on the street when her coffin was being driven in the street. So it's a wonderful, spontaneous human emotion to show adoration for somebody who had passed. And as a family, we were deeply touched by it. We collected as many of the flowers as we could, and we left them at the gravesite, which was a little bit tedious, but we didn't, I mean, even everybody knew that her favorite flower were geraniums. They bought every single geranium in pots at this flower thing and threw the pots and everything on. There was dirt, there were flowers, it was wonderful. It really was.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember seeing this on the news, you know, the German news at that time, like 30 years ago. And people were asking, they were cheering, and they were standing on their balconies with, flags on and transparent saying adieu, Marlene. And yeah.
Welcome home, Marlene was the one I loved. That was my favorite. Welcome home.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
that
people
must
of
have been
Berlin
touching.
are wonderful.
I love the story about her first cabaret performance after the war, and how the German people were angry and protesting, and then it ended with 18 curtain calls.
Yeah, I think the point is, she was, the one thing about the German people you can say is that they're not dishonest. They may fool themselves occasionally as a nation, which we've seen in the past 2 centuries, but they're never really dishonest. And they respected Marlene's honesty of saying, this is what I believe, this is what I'm doing, you're wrong, I'm right, listen up. And her performance in 1960, when she went back to Germany, was straight down the line honest. She didn't hate anybody. She walked in the crowds in the street. Some people spat at her, some people applauded her. She was being steadfast and true, and that earned her the respect for people to start to listen. And when they listened to her words, when they listened to her hatred of war, when they listened, she wasn't celebrating killing Germans. She was celebrating ending the war as fast as possible. War is evil. It's wrong. Don't do it. When she sings "Where Are All the Flowers Gone" by Pete Seeger, there isn't a dry eye in the house. Not a dry eye in the house. That, of all her songs she ever sang, including Lily Marlene and everything, there's no song she preferred better than "Where Have All the Flowers Gone." That it's probably one of the best anti-war ballads ever written.
And
In
given
every
her
language,
traveling-
in every language. I've heard it in Hebrew, Russian, German, Italian, French. Every time, it's brilliant.
And given her traveling around with the troops, I mean, what she must have seen, I'm sure.
Well, no, it's horrible. War, you know, people, unfortunately, I know quite a few Vietnam vets, and I also knew a lot of, my father included, who served in the Second World War. They never talked about the war. They don't, anybody you hear bragging about being a soldier in wartime probably didn't do anything in wartime. The people who actually were on the front lines, who saw what it really was like, there's nothing to brag about. There's nothing to be proud of. You just had to do your job to get where you are. And Marlene knew that. She knew that really well. And so for her, anything that could avoid war or put in your head that war is not something you want to engage in, it was important to her. It was very important to her. The horror she saw in the Second World War, don't forget, during the Battle of the Bulge, she was moved aside because obviously she was in danger. Patton and Bradley moved her aside, and in moving her aside, they put her on a military transport plane for 2 hours that was way below freezing, and she froze from the waist down. Solid. Everything was hard. And it took her 2 days to warm up from that. And that's why later on in life, when she injured herself falling off the stage in Australia, the leg wound wouldn't heal because the valve that splits to go to your legs was damaged when it was frozen. So DeBakey in Houston, wonderful, Bernard, just the greatest doctor, Michael DeBakey, he operated and fixed that valve so that the leg could heal. I mean, you just do what you have to do. If you really, like everything with Marlene, you do it either 100% or you don't do it at all. So she had to fight. She had to fight Washington to be able to go and entertain the troops in Europe. They wanted to send her to Japan. She said, I know nothing about the Japanese. I know nothing about, I can go to Europe. I can sing songs in German that you can broadcast to the German soldiers that will make them understand that this is not the right thing. I can then support the Allied troops who think of me as a sex symbol. Danny Thomas does the comedy, I do the sex, and we can entertain the troops. And Danny Thomas at Nate Now's, which is a deli in Beverly Hills, I'd have breakfast with Danny Thomas, and he'd say, your grandmother, she tried to get us killed every single night. They'd try and get us killed. If there was any daylight, we had to get back in the truck, and we'd go and find 6 soldiers in a foxhole and do the whole routine for 6 soldiers. You know, that's his sense of humor, to say that he too was fighting just as hard as she was, and because he would have refused if he didn't want to. And that kind of mentality, you know, the only other person I've ever seen in the USO who has that dedication is Bob Hope. And that's why Marlene and Bob Hope were always respectful of each other. I mean, they were in different eras, different kind of mentality as far as comedy and celebrity and everything's concerned. But boy, did they have that in common. Bob Hope loved Marlene and she loved him.
Do you think this had to do with her upgrowing, like this strong, like German Pflicht? She was.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, Carrie, the word Pflicht in German is responsibility, but you hear it sounds like a whip going off. Pflicht. Yeah, that's how Germans take responsibility. You just a little bit of cat of the nine tails on your own back until you get it right. It's all right. I grew up with that. To a certain extent, I have that myself.
Yeah, I think that's you don't ask why, because you just have to do what you have to do. So
yeah, and you do it 100%.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do it right. Don't say that's good enough. No, it's not. Good enough is never enough. So what did you want to ask me else?
That totally makes sense. Benjamin also had a great question. He said that he read Marlene was a fan of Robert Redford. And what did Marlene think about the stars who followed her in later?
Well, first of all, in the 50s in New York, there were young actors coming up, a lot of actors who were stage actors. Jack Lemmon was a family friend of my family. Marlene knew him through my mother. Walter Matthau, those kind of people, wonderful people. She enjoyed their company always. Playwrights, O'Neill, people like that were important. Robert Redford was an up-and-coming actor on TV first. She thought he was beautiful. He had a beautiful delivery, and as a visual thing, because she understood the visual impact, she thought he was particularly beautiful. Later on, my brother worked with Robert Redford. He did 2 or 3 movies with Robert Redford. One was Brubaker, and then he did Ordinary People, for which he got an Academy Award nomination. Robert and my brother were friends, and Marlene used to talk to Robert either through my brother or with my brother, as the case may be, on the phone. I think she had a great regard for him. I think that there's a difference between acting and performance. You ask about stars. You know, the thing is, Robert Redford was clearly a star, not necessarily a great actor to her. She wasn't evaluating him as an actor. Having seen the television work, certainly you wouldn't think he's a great actor, but he became a very big star, and he always gave a first-rate performance. Similarly, Paul Newman was clearly a star for the movies, but she also recognized that he was a great actor. The fact that he was my mother's friend probably kept her a little less interested in him, because she knew that Maria would keep an eye on him, see what the hell he did. Paul Newman was just one of those great people. You know, the thing is, if you talk about who she thought at that time were the people in movies that she looked at them and said, these are great leading men that I would act against and be happy to act with. People like Marcello Mastroianni, clearly top of the heap. De Niro, she saw the movie Midnight Run, and I think she laughed for 3 days. She just thought Robert De Niro was, you know, a wonderful on camera, but a sense of timing that she just loved. I mean, if you haven't seen Midnight Run, for God's sake, just get the popcorn out and have it just a blast. And just think of Marlene laughing herself silly over this movie, because she thought it was just wonderful. And you know, my brother would say to her, well, you know, keep an eye on this guy, and they'd have a conversation like Forrest Whitaker. She thought Forrest Whitaker had talent. Oh my God, he had talent. But she said the studio system would never back him. You know, she knows what she knew where the problem areas and the hurdles were for actors and actresses. And I think that she's right about Forrest Whitaker. I think he's one of the top 10 actors working in movies in the world, but never is going to get the recognition that he deserves, because he won't have a studio system behind him to make it possible. But as an actor, untouchable. So yeah, she watched a lot of people, French actors. She loved Alain Delon. I mean, who doesn't love Alain Delon, you know, and so on and so forth. And it just, for her, because she had no ambition. She wasn't looking for people that would be good opposite her or with her, or she could do something with. She wasn't vain in any sense. So for her, it was just enjoying people doing their jobs properly. And I think, you know, as she said once to my mother, you know, is there a movie that Marcello makes that isn't fantastic? So that's pretty much sums up her thing. But she loved people like Jack Lemmon, because again, Jack Lemmon was a perfect actor for films and for television, because he always did a perfect job and he was great, but not star quality in the sense that you're not going to pin him up on your bedroom wall as a young girl. It's not going to happen. So she was able to differentiate different roles within the industry, and she knew the industry far too well. Elizabeth Taylor, who she always had a little personal angst with because of shared lovers and stuff. Nevertheless, when Elizabeth Taylor started doing the AIDS work, quietly, Marlene phoned a lot of friends and said, you get hold of Elizabeth at Amphar, give her money. Absolutely, give her money. Marlene was very clear that she knew that if she mishandled that conversation, it would not be good for Elizabeth's work at AmFAR. So she did it the other way around, calling politicians and people and saying, no, no, you support Elizabeth in that. And she also, I think, did that with a lot of the airlines to make sure that Elizabeth could always travel and the people in AmFAR could travel for free so that they could get to charity events and things like that. For her, there was never a quid pro quo. She either did what was right or didn't do it.
Benjamin, I think you had a question you wanted to ask about the Maximilian Schell documentary.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. She told in the documentary. She says, well, it was about impersonators.
Yeah.
And she said, well, men are very much succeeding in doing this. So I thought, was she interested in how people were interpreting her legend? So like people are influenced.
I think that she saw the impact some of her roles had on society and people wanting to imitate them. She had no problem with transgender people, with gay people, with straight people imitating her whatsoever. Madonna, when I first moved to New York in '81, Madonna was very busy in reinventing herself from a model at the New School into a singer, and started to use, particularly Madonna's brother Christopher, who I got to know, was very interested in Dietrich and using a lot of Dietrich's visuals, for lack of a better term, helping Madonna's career advance in the way it should with modern twist. Very intelligent man, Christopher. I mean, don't underestimate Madonna's brother Christopher. Very intelligent man. History will show that. He would quite often phone and ask for guidance and stuff, and I'd call Marlene and ask her, and she'd give some advice. I think that, you know, one of her advice was to Madonna, less is more. Less costume is more. I think that she didn't mind imitators as long as those imitators weren't, if they were a tribute, she never minded, because she worked too hard to give that to her public. If her public was being corrupted by a bad imitation, she didn't like it at all. A completely new innovation based on her, wonderful, absolutely fine. If Marlene was still alive today, she'd be doing live streaming with you, Gary, and she would be doing YouTube videos and TikTok and everything else, because the medium for her was always an adventure, and she loved that. She would have made a great, as my mother has quite often pointed out, Marlene would have made a great director, a wonderful director. The farther out project, the better. One of the films that my brother and I enforced her to watch in London, this is in the early 70s, I think. We got a 16 mil copy of 2001 Space Odyssey. And a lot of it went right by her, but she thought that this was perhaps the greatest advance in motion picture making that she'd seen in a long time. She thought that's going to change everything. The irreality that you saw on the screen became totally believable, and she loved every moment of that. Adventurous woman.
Yeah, she seemed to be ahead of her time in so many ways. So
yeah.
Where do you think she got the ideas from? Like I think I know there was a correspondence even in the 50s about she wanted an illuminated dress for a stage, which at that time there was no fabric or something. But where did she get the ideas?
Well, there's a partnership of Marlene and Maria. Vegas happened because of my mother, not any other reason. My mother said, you need to be able to sing to your boys in a place that will put you on stage on a regular basis. And you're friends with Frank Sinatra and you're friends with these, talk to them, set it up, do Vegas. And then came, what am I going to look like on stage? Do I wear the top hat and tails all the time? Do I wear the dress I wore in the Second World War? That's not glamorous enough. It has some shimmer to it. If you've seen the pictures, it had sequins on it, sort of fish scale sequins, but it had to be foldable and put into a small container, so it wasn't elaborate. And this collaboration with Jean-Louis, which came out of the collaboration with Jean-Louis' mentor at Paramount, these dresses were created both by Maria and Marlene. Now, one when she first went to Vegas and saw the lighting on the street in Vegas and saw the glitz of the lighting and the moving lights and everything, the reflectivity of the dress that was being designed could have also been illuminated better. And so my father, being a scenic designer in New York, made up a piece of material about so big with mini lights in it. Not LEDs, because there weren't LEDs at that time. Had there been, it would have been done. So there were little light bulbs, but it required too much electricity. The battery pack would have been too big, et cetera. It wouldn't have lasted. It became too complicated. Instead of which, my father put together a rotating filter with a Fresnel lens on the spotlights in Vegas, which as they rotated caused the dress to twinkle. So it was a combination of family effort and what Marlene wanted.
I saw a documentary piece on YouTube where some fashion experts in Germany actually recreate what Dietrich would have wanted with this gown that has these lights that almost beat in time to the music.
Yeah, there was a lot of conversation about it. It just electromechanically wasn't possible because we didn't have LEDs at that time. Today, absolutely. She would have done it with LEDs in a half a second. I mean, why not? I mean, again, pushing the envelope. That's exactly who she was.
It's really awe-inspiring to think of how far ahead of her time she was. I mean, it's really amazing.
Yeah, but quite a remarkable person. I mean, she saw, you guys are way too young. There was a thing called Cinerama back in the 60s, where there were 3 projectors, not one Panavision, but 3 projectors, so you could get a screen that wrapped right around you. And if you've ever seen a movie in really well set up, well done Cinerama, it was startling. You were in the scene. It was great. And she was in love with Cinerama. She loved the idea of Cinerama. She wanted to remake a lot of the movies that had been made before. And she would talk to people about it. But Cinerama was too expensive to make because it required 3 cameras and 3 coordination. And today, they do it electronically. IMAX, would she have liked IMAX? I guarantee you she would have loved IMAX. Loved it. I mean, why not? Bigger, better, bolder. The other thing, Carrie, is remember this. Marlene had no vanity. And yet she was able to craft her image so that her head, 30 feet high on a movie screen back in the 30s, her head was 30 feet high on some of those movie screens, was perfect. Now, to do that without vanity means that you're just totally, absolutely professional, dedicated, going to do it right. People say to me, well, why did she become a recluse? What recluse? She didn't become a recluse. She visually removed herself from the public because she wasn't going to destroy the work that she did before. You spend $5,000 a month on the phone to 50 or 60 letters to people a day, you're not a recluse. Does it mean you're letting people visit you all the time? No, but family visited her, really good friends visited her. And the old friends would say, oh, Marlene, I want to come up and see you, And she'd say, no, I prefer not. Why? Because why destroy their illusion? Because you get old.
Well, and I think Hollywood and our society and culture in general is very hard on women. And you're almost treated as if aging is an unpardonable sin and criticized for it. And it's not fair because we all get older and there's really no way around it unless you're not here anymore. So
you're right. But the epitome of that was the Academy Award sometime in the mid-late 80s, who said, we'd like to give you a Lifetime Achievement Award. And we voted and unanimously, and you deserve a Lifetime Achievement Award. And we're, it's an oversight of the Academy Award since the beginning, because you let's face it, you first made your film in 1930, and you've been here as long as the Academy's been here, and you should get a Lifetime Achievement Award. And she said, sure, okay, thank you very much. It's a great honor. Then they said, yes, there's one condition. You have to show up and go on TV to be presented with the award. And she said, what you're asking me for is to do a performance for you at my age. I'm not doing one. Thank you very much. If that's what the award really was an excuse to get me to perform, I'm no longer performing. End of discussion. Why? Did she want, would she have been honored with an Academy Award? Of course she would have. But she wasn't going to destroy the image for all those millions of people who still today, I get email and fan mail from people who think that she's still alive because they just saw her picture in Russia or Tajikistan or someplace. I get a letter in languages sometimes I can't understand, I have to have translated, that you talk about how wonderful you are and talking straight to her as if she's still here. That's what she worked for. She didn't work to destroy it later on.
That also reminds me that, was it, I think, Ernest Hemingway who said, well, she could do everything with her voice. And there was a German opera house was reopened after the Berlin Wall went down. And she was on the phone and saying, well, I remember this from my UFA years, but this was on the phone, so she didn't have to show up. But I think that was very nice to her because she participated in those events.
Oh, yeah, sure. No, she collaborated with a lot of people. Max Kolpe, who wrote some of the songs that she sang, the lyrics and stuff. You know, he used to call her regularly and ask her to call this person or that person and intervene and help. And I mean, her life was busy. It wasn't like she was sitting there doing nothing.
It was on her own.
Except when the French Open was on. And don't call her while the French Open is on TV because she ain't going to talk to you.
But I like how she did things on her own terms, not the terms of others.
Yeah, well, she earned it, so why not? The problem is she earned it, so she was entitled to do so. But that same imperiousness was very evident from her early 20s.
She's just such a fascinating person. That's why I really enjoy talking to you. I think she is so endlessly complicated, interesting, and intelligent. There's so much to unpack.
Yeah, well,
and I love that I love that her image, especially in Berlin, is seen all over, like on walls. I saw it, posters and souvenir shops. So she's very much connected to Berlin.
Yeah.
And I think that was when she would have been 100. That was kind of reinventing. So I'm glad to see her again and again when I'm in Berlin.
I am too, and you know, there's a series of television shows. We'll start production in January in Germany, featuring her life and times, and then hopefully we're going to make a motion picture of the same different period of her life, a shortened period of her time, but we'll make a motion picture of the same. I think that the example that she has for people still exists. You know, when she passed, all the archive, I had 8 storage facilities with things that she collected from the beginning of her career. And as her whole life was really about her career, most of this was about the preeminent art form of the 20th century. And we brought all of that I had a farm, and there was a farm next door with an empty barn, and we put everything in the barn and we cataloged it and so on. And halfway through, I got a phone call from the Senator for Culture of Berlin, Senator Ulrich Roloff Momen, who said to me, Peter, we need the anti-Nazi back in Berlin. And I said, I beg your pardon? And he said, with Germany being reunited, half of the country has never learned the lessons that West Berlin has learned about Nazism and about opposing Nazism, but being successful. We need the anti-Nazi back as an example of you can follow your own inner strength and morality and be world famous without being a Nazi and authoritarian and dictator and so on. And so we agreed to move all the archive to Germany and to Berlin. And they have a wonderful museum there and collection that we're still very much in support day to day with. And the joke on Carry for America is that I went to all our major institutions who said, well, maybe we'll take a dress. How about 4 or 5 photographs? She's just a movie star. And there was no academy in California at that time. And Michael and I and Robert Redford and a whole bunch of other people were screaming at all these other directors, Dick Donner and people like that, for God's sake, start a museum before everything is lost. And of course, now 90% of what was turned out by the great years in Hollywood has been completely destroyed. Some of it's been saved, and they're working on it as hard as they can, but they missed an opportunity to have 3 truckloads of memorabilia in Hollywood. They weren't interested. There was nobody there. And, you know, when you talk to the Met Museum in New York or MoMA or LACMA in California, and they say, well, you know, 3 or 4 photographs, I say, excuse me, I have 25,000 photographs by the preeminent photographers of the last 100 years. And you want 3 or 4 photographs? How are you going to even pick? Well, you could pick the ones you think look good. I gave up. So all of it went to Germany, and they're wonderful because they curated it properly, they protected everything. They're intelligent people, they've done the research, and they place these traveling exhibits around the world, and they're a great resource for film historians. You know, their own archive, the archive there at the Stiftung Deutsche Kinemathek, has over 1 million photographs of film things around the world, and they're really wonderful, preserving things, documenting it, cross-referencing it. We have nothing like that in America, nothing. The Academy isn't even beginning to understand what to do. They're nice people. They have the first budget, great. They build a pretty building, great. What's in it?
I agree with you. I think it's very frustrating. I was telling Benjamin before I joined us, I went to an auction preview the other night for Julian's here in Los Angeles. And I always go to the auction previews because for me, it's like a free museum exhibit. And it's a way to look at stuff that I really can't afford to buy, but get to admire. And it's kind of makes me always sad though, because I know a lot of that stuff is going to go in private collections and is going to be whisked away and may never be seen again.
Yeah,
and,
Carrie, but there's something good there. Let me help you.
Okay, sure.
As much as I hate, as you do, stuff being dispersed, it's a whole lot better than having it put into a garbage bin. And
You're
that's
right,
what Hollywood
yeah.
was doing before. My brother, when he finished Color Purple, all right, and Ordinary People, all the drawings that he did, because he was the art director, all the drawings he did and everything were burned. Why? Because the studio didn't want to spend the money storing them. All the costumes used in that thing that weren't stolen by the cast, and most of them weren't, were put into reuse, and they've been taken apart and put together in the thing. And I mean, it's all gone. It's the thing is, they'll keep the poster, they'll keep a print of the film. They don't even keep the outtakes, Carrie. They don't keep the outtakes. The directors have it in their contract that the outtakes will be destroyed so that nobody can ever see a different version or anything else. No, I'm sorry. Put it in your contract that it's frozen in a vault for 100 years. That I could live with. But destroyed? Why? What's the point?
It seems like from the very beginning, this town, Hollywood, has always had a very poor sense of appreciating its own history. And that's
no culture, Carrie, no culture.
I agree. It's a problem. I do what I can to keep stuff alive, but it is a problem.
Well, I think you're doing everything you're doing is the right thing to do. Talk about it, put it out, keep a record of it, have people discuss it, have material available. Of course, that means somebody's got to store it. Somebody's got to look after it. So, you know, Benjamin, you know a lot of collectors in Germany of memorabilia. You know, they're serious about protecting it. They are serious about protecting it. You know, you put the name Marilyn Monroe on something, they are really serious about protecting it. And that may be a little bit out there. Sometimes you may say, well, that's a little cuckoo. But on the other hand, the stuff is protected. And at the end of the day, hopefully that whole gestalt, that whole collection will go somewhere else safe, that it can be understood. Years ago, I was at the Rencontre Internationale de la Photographie down in Arles in France in the early 80s. And the head of the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris was there to buy photographs from photographers. And photographers would show them 30 or 40 images that they wanted him to consider. And if he liked the work generally, he would say, we have a budget to buy 5, here's what we can afford to pay. And of course, the photographers pay me nothing to have my photographs in the Bibliothèque Nationale, the National Library of France, honored to give them to you. No, we have to buy them. And then the photographer say, well, which 5 do you want? And he would say, oh no, you're the photographer, you choose the 5. And the photographers would all say, but don't you have ones you prefer or not? He says, well, of course I do. Well, then you should choose what you want. And he would say, no, you don't understand. We won't know what is good or bad until 200 years from now. So you pick what you think is important. And 200 years from now, somebody will decide whether you're right or wrong. That's museums. That's how you collect things for the history. You don't make a judgment based on taste today. You make judgment based on an evaluation in hindsight 200 years from now of what formed the importance of art or formed the importance of society. And America hasn't learned that lesson yet. And I was in the basement of the Smithsonian, and if you saw the way they're storing artifacts from Lincoln, and I mean, it made me cry. We don't put budget in. Berlin, the Senator for Culture of Berlin has a budget, an annual budget of $660 million for Berlin. You get it, Carrie?
I need to go to Berlin. I have not been yet.
Yes.
That's more than the entire public budget of all museums in the United States. And you know, people in Berlin say we're overtaxed, we're over this. No, shut up. Stuff is being preserved so that your culture remains intact, so that your freedom of expression remains intact, so that your openness as a city, and Berlin's the most open city in the world, in my opinion. Your openness as a city remains, so that people can come there and evaluate fairly what is the balance of culture in your city, if not your country, at least in your city. And America has to do that. We haven't learned that. You go down to the Smithsonian museums, and I've been fortunate enough to hang an airplane in the Air and Space Museum, a project I was in charge of. And it warms your heart to see these things in the Air and Space Museum and in the American Indian Museum and so on. These are great institutions. But I'm very aware that in the basement, there's no money for the stuff stored in the basement. There's no resources there. If you go to the Völkerkunde Museum in Berlin and you go to the basement, for every one item you see up above on exhibit, there's 400 down below, perfectly preserved, perfectly looked after. That's how you maintain your archive as a country. If you don't maintain it that way, you're left with make-believe. And you know what make-believe has given us, Carrie, right? 4 years of that.
I was thinking, did you know about the amount of the collection Marlene had, or was there something?
Yeah, who do you think was paying the
surprising?
storage bills?
Yeah. I love when your mother came to Berlin to tell all the stories behind those items. Like, well, this was the couch from the Paramount dressing room Mae West used to sit on and everything. So yeah. It's besides all those items, it's great to preserve all those stories behind, I think.
Well, only my mother, who has the memory of an elephant, could do all that. And one of the things I was so happy with is that Werner Sudendorf and Silke Ronneberg from the museum came to Palm Springs and sat with my mother for, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 hours over 2 days, and asked her every question they could think of and asked her to tell every story she could think of and just recorded it all. And they have that as an archive, because when my mother passes, I guarantee you, I know this much compared to what she knows. I mean, it's just incredible what she knows. You know, when she wrote the book, the only criticism some people had was, well, you know, the dialogue sounds good, but, you know, it's not really what people said. And then when the archive went to Berlin and they opened up and found all the letters, because back in those days, people didn't phone, they wrote letters. They read the letters. The dialogue in the book was word for word the dialogue written in the letters. And they went, how did Maria remember all this? And I remember sitting with Bill Paley, the head of CBS, over lunch. And he said to me that, he said, Peter, your mother was the best actress CBS ever hired. She was my favorite actress. And I said, Mr. Paley, that's extraordinary. He said, no, you don't understand. Live TV. I'd call her on Tuesday, tell her there's a role that I need her on Thursday. We'd send the script over. Wednesday morning rehearsal, she was word perfect on her lines and everybody else's lines, helping them. And then on Thursday live, never made a mistake. And I thought this was extraordinary. So I was out in LA visiting mom, and Rod Steiger was out there, and Roddy McDowell and Carol Channing. And they all told the same story. They said, if we could get in a live thing with Maria, it was perfect because we'd look at her and say, give us the line. And Maria always knew the lines. I mean, it's who she is. She has this memory that she can bring it right to it. And not only out of context, in context, which is extraordinary, which is why her book is so much fun, is because, yeah, it's written as dialogue because that's what you do nowadays, but really it was a letter dialogue at that time because people wrote intimate letters to each other as if it was a phone call.
And Maria's a great writer. I
phone
find
calls that
that book
easy.
to be impossible to put down.
Sorry,
I
Carrie?
love
Maria's a
when your
great
mother
writer.
came to,
Hang on, Carrie, you're frozen.
Maria's a great writer. I mean, there's just the way. Are you guys there?
Oh, Carrie, we're losing you.
Oh, my internet again. Dadgummit, why is it doing this?
No, I hear you again. You're there. You're there.
Okay.
You're back, Carrie.
Yeah, but she's a wonderful writer. And there are just some sentences in that book I've read, and I'm just like, wow. I mean, she's so beautifully written and so articulate, so vivid too. Like, I have an imagination when I read that book. I'm there in Germany with them. I am there when they're at Cap d'Antibes. I am, it's so incredibly brings Dietrich and her world to life.
Yeah, well, she every word written by her by hand. She'd write during the day by hand, and my father would type at night and hand her typewritten pages in the morning. She would edit and then write on on the yellow lined paper. She would write by hand every single word. And interestingly, when it came to the German translation, my mother was very keen on not having it turned into something wrong. So she and Klaus Eck and Claudia Vidoni worked together week after week in the hotel in Munich to do the translation into German. The French translation was done by a very talented woman, Irish-French woman, and her translation was wonderful in French too.
I love when your mother came to Germany to promote her book. She toured a few TV and she spoke German, and I love that.
Auch Deutsch.
Yes.
Carrie, there's, high society German and common German. My mother was never in school in Germany, so she never learned common German. She learned Auch Deutsch. And of course, people always go, oh, she speaks Auch Deutsch. It's all she knew as a child. I mean, for her, that's. But there was a wonderful thing that happened in Hamburg. There was a night show, which was completely ridiculous night show with cabaret, and it was the celebration of the anniversary of the siege of Stalingrad. And I mean, there was some serious moments in this. It's one of these segmented shows with people drinking and cafe clutch. And so they came to Mother, and the guy says to her, he wanted to find something controversial to say to her. He says, in your book, you say that you were raped by a woman, but a woman can't rape a woman. And my mother, she was brilliant. She just launched right into, you don't understand what rape is. Rape is about violence. It's sexual violence. Any person can rape another person. It doesn't have to do with penetration of a penis. And the whole audience was crying. When she was finished, everybody was crying. They had their heads fell apart. So we come out of the recording, and I thought my mother must have to go to the bathroom, because she came out when cut, it was over. She comes running out, and she goes by me and the PR woman, who's a sweet woman. She comes running by us, and she's going straight for the exit. And I look at what the hell's going on? So I run after her to find out what's going on. She gets in the limo, and she's in laughter so loud that she's almost choking. She's laughing so loud. And so I say, Mom, what the hell's going on? She said, it took everything I had not to start singing Mel Brooks's movie, Springtime for Hitler and Germany. I mean, because it was so outrageous, the question he asked, that it sort of fit into that whole nonsense. No, get your heads together. Well, the next morning, we're at the airport having a coffee before we get on our flight to go somewhere else. And it's time our flight to go and to pay. And the woman says, I can't take your money. And my mother says, don't be silly, you're working. And She says, no, I can't take your money. You have the honesty to talk about that happened to you as a child. And she starts to cry. We missed the flight. The two of them are hugging and kissing. And mom says to me, if my book does only that, it was worth doing. Because this girl had been raped by an aunt. And nobody ever allowed her to say that she'd been molested, raped by her aunt. Because a woman can't rape a woman. And those moments make everything worthwhile. And you know, Marlene was that way. I mean, you either did the right thing or the wrong thing with Marlene. I mean, you step in the wrong direction as far as gender identity or anything else is concerned, you're toast. Now, Marlene believed a man is a man and a woman is a woman, but that had nothing to do with their sexual proclivity. That's up to them and none of anybody's damn business. Similarly, race, same thing. When she was going to South Africa, and it was announced in the press. Marlon Brando wrote her a note, which is in the museum, by the way. You know, how dare you go to South Africa, apartheid and everything. In a way, he was right. She wrote him back saying, I'll take care of South Africa, you take care of Texas. Because she'd been to Texas, checking into a hotel with Pearl Bailey next to her. They refused Pearl Bailey a room and gave her a room. And she said, no, you don't understand, we're traveling together. So now they couldn't refuse her. She put Pearl Bailey in the master bedroom and she took the maid's bedroom to make a point. That's her, right? So she goes to South Africa. She only hired Black musicians, she and Burt Bacharach. They only hired Black musicians and they made sure that they were dressed to the nines. I know because I had to go to Harrods and buy the socks to make sure they all had the right black socks on stage. That's Marlene. You know, yeah, really? You're going to have apartheid? Guess what? They're all Black musicians. Deal with that. So for her, the moral middle ground was your private life is your private life. But the moment you start to impose upon somebody, you're wrong. Period. Wrong. You know, getting a telegram coming across on the Normandy, and the telegram says Miss Dietrich will be arrested in Paris if she's wearing trousers. The first thing she did was put trousers on and showed up in Paris wearing trousers. And what were the cops going to do? Really? You're going to arrest her? The next day, the prefect of police sent her a bracelet, which is in the museum engraved to Miss Dietrich, we're sorry.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because they realized it's a mistake. No, don't do that. There may be some stupid law in the books that women can't wear trousers, but guess what? You're wrong. So, you know, Carrie, you're sitting in the kitchen, you're doing these wonderful kitchen things, and I'm going on too long. But honestly, the same thing applied. If the butcher sent around a piece of meat that was not right, Marlene would send it right back and tell him to get it right. And if he didn't know how to butcher the meat properly, she'd go to the butcher. I'm talking about Manhattan off Park Avenue. She'd go to the butcher and she'd slice off of the hind paw, the rump, to show him how to slice the steak properly. So the grain lays the right way. You do it the right way, or you don't do it at all. It just, you know, there's things that, it wasn't a question of money. It was a question of doing the right thing at the right time. You know, she used to make fun of American bread, you know, white bread and all that sort of stuff. She thought it was just god awful, you know. Yeah, she had no right to criticize bread, except she could bake better bread in 2 hours than you could buy in the grocery store. And so could my other grandmother. So I still make my own bread. Yeah, it's cheaper and better. So it's not complicated to make bread. You take 3 cups of flour, you take a half a teaspoon of yeast, you put 2 teaspoons of salt in, you put hot water, you mix it around, don't knead it, mix it around, set aside for 3 hours, take it out, turn it over, put it in a Le Creuset, I call it. It's a cast iron pot with a lid. You put it in the oven at 450 for 45 minutes, take the lid off for another 15 minutes. You've got a perfect crusty loaf of bread that you can't buy in the shop.
Peter, what you realize here is you're laying the groundwork for you to come back to Benjamin and I on Hollywood Kitchen multiple times. We've got to do now a Marlene Dietrich homemade jelly donut recipe.
Oh,
We've gotta
God.
do a
I got to
bread
get that recipe.
episode.
Okay, I got to get
Get
that recipe.
yourself in deep here with throwing out
Okay.
more of these ideas.
Okay. Actually, I should also get my nephew, Michael Jr., because my brother Michael was a great cook, and I know Michael Jr. can talk about some of Michael's cooking too. Some of his cooking, which he did for, if you look at Michael's motion picture history, Carrie, I think you'll be slightly impressed.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar. Absolutely. We would be, I'd love to do a Dietrich family episode.
Yeah,
That would be
get
fun.
Mikey on. Mikey's good fun, and he knows a lot of stuff.
I mean, obviously artistic talent runs very, very rampant in your family.
All right, you could even get my brother Paul. He's in Thailand teaching English to refugee kids from Burma, and he has his own memories. You know, our family was, Michael and I were the eldest, and then there was 7 years to Paul and 11 years to David. So it's almost like two different sets of kids. So everybody has different experiences. Paul spent a lot of time with Marlene when I was at boarding school that I didn't get to do. So he has other memories of her, which are kind of fun.
Just setting us up for more and more episodes.
Yeah, but I got to tell you something. The skate naps aspic, which was of all the things that Marlene ever cooked, that's my absolute favorite. Skate and aspic.
Oh, yes.
Tons of dill. Oh my God. And Sandy and I still, my wife, we still drool over that, but we've never managed to do it.
Send me the recipe.
She never wrote it down. There's a cook bouillon involved. I got to ask my mother.
Please
Sure,
do.
remember.
I would love that. To me, doing these episodes, it's fun because every time I do an episode, sometimes people write me and go, oh, you know, they really did make this. And I'm like, in this case, I know they did. I absolutely know they did. And also, I think food kind of is something that everybody can enjoy, everybody can relate to. It kind of has the power, much like movies, to kind of bring people together, to unite people. It's something we can share. And it kind of really, it's like the gateway to open a conversation about their humanity, about their personal life, about who they were.
That's nice.
Food kind of opens a lot of doors here. And that's one thing I've really enjoyed so much about doing these episodes. I mentioned like a year ago, I got Faye Ray's daughter, Victoria Riskin, and I sent her like over a dozen recipes I found in movie magazines and books. And she wrote back, none of these are correct. And I was like, okay, fine. What did she make? And she's like, here's what she made. Here's my personal copy of the recipe. Let's do this. And I was like,
cool.
Brilliant, because she was there, she would know. And then she got, not only she was on camera, but also Faye Ray's granddaughter. So I had the daughter, the it's just such a wonderful way to look at someone's life, their family, it really opens doors for such interesting conversations.
Yeah, the jelly donuts, that's going to take, I have to work on that.
I'm going to be dreaming about jelly donuts, Peter, so you've got to get me that recipe, please.
I tell you what, though, I know it involves, got to get the right yeast, and I don't know if we're going to find the right yeast, but I'll talk to Mom and find out.
Please do, because I will go to the ends of the earth to locate the right products to make
sugared jelly donuts. And by the way, I don't know if you've ever eaten a sugared jelly donut, but there's an English competition that Marlene thought was absolutely hysterical for children. Here's what you do. You take a jelly donut and you take a bite and see if you can eat it without licking your lips. It's torture.
It is.
I've never known anybody manage to eat a jelly donut without licking their lips.
Okay, we're gonna have to do a contest on the episode. We get the whole Dietrich family on Zoom and we'll all eat jelly donuts and try.
We're all gonna fail. I mean, it's guaranteed failure.
But it's
Your
a matter
lips
of
are
who
itching
licks
to
their
be
lips.
licked.
Who licks their lips the last is the person that will win the Dietrich jelly donut derby.
I know I'm gonna lose right away, so it's okay.
Well, Peter, this has been absolutely fascinating.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And Benjamin, as always, thank you for your invaluable questions and research and friendship. I'm so grateful.
Thank you
Thanks,
for
my
having me.
friends.
It was great. And for me today, it's like I'm smelling the dill here, and I'm getting to know today, wow, how
Well,
cool
wait a
it is.
second. Nobody's tasted their salad.
Oh, I'll taste
Oh,
mine
yeah.
right now. You know, and all the time we're talking, I've kind of been mashing up some of these cucumbers, and they are starting to release the juice. So Very good.
It's good. Without the dill, it's
Love
no
dill.
good. Yeah, me too. Can't have enough dill. Now that I've filled your mouths, that's it. I'll say goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Riva.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Benjamin. And tune in again for more food, fun, and film history from Hollywood.
Absolutely. Bye, Carrie.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank
Benjamin.
you.